folks coming out of school or entering the workforce where they had the ability to kind of work remotely and from anywhere. It did people early in their career an incredible disservice, in my opinion. Get into the office, get around the decision makers. You're going to just learn so much. You're going to speed up your career immensely that way.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Multifamily Hangout. I'm your host, Adrian Danila. I want to start by introducing our sponsors that are making this broadcast possible. They are Kairos and GPS Roof Leak Repairs. With this being said, I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Chris Moreno. Take it away, sir.
Thank you, Adrian. And hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us live on LinkedIn and on YouTube live. Every week, we have a special guest, and this is no different. Today, we get to welcome Jeff Kaupek, the Chief Operating Officer at Middle Street Partners. And Jeff has a ton of expertise across multiple players from Chartwell to Greystar, and he has led the Atlanta regional office. He's now overseeing a portfolio of assets, but has a lot of extensive experience on the asset management side, property level management, and obviously on the operations and maintenance side. Jeff also is a graduate of James Madison University. Really cool is that he has a master's in real estate from the University of Georgia right here in Athens. So really excited to hear more about that and some of the work he's doing. So without further ado, welcome Jeff to the podcast.
Thanks, Chris and Adrian. Appreciate you having me. Chris, for the first time saying my last name, you actually got it right, which is atypical. So yeah,
I only spent 45 minutes to practice it, but we can go deeper on your history and your background. But
the shout out about James Madison is great. We've had a big year in sports. So Georgia always has big years, but JMU getting a little press has made me pretty happy.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'd love to maybe hear from your own words. A little bit of how you fell into real estate. And then maybe even a little bit about going back to school and diving deeper into real estate.
Sure, you bet. First of all, thank you again for having me on. Adrian, you asked me to be a part of this. There's no way that I was going to say no to you, even though I've never been on a podcast. And then I didn't read the fine print that this is actually live. So highly uncomfortable in this situation right now, but still pumped to be here. So thank you. Be nice. My first one. Yeah, I kind of fell into the industry when I graduated from JMU. That was in 2000. That was during the great, kind of .com bubble, if you will. And that's where the opportunities were. And for the first 4 years of my career, it was in tech. Great opportunity in DC, had a great experience there, but at the same time, kind of knew that wasn't really, what I was really motivated for long term. Wanted to go back to school. Terry College of Business, Athens, Georgia, had a phenomenal program. It was actually an 11-month accelerated program for people who kind of had their BBA and also had some kind of work history behind them. You had to kind of qualify for that to get in, and that just made all the sense in the world for me. So my girlfriend at the time, now wife, we left DC. We traveled the country for a while, landed in Athens, spent 11 amazing months in Athens, Georgia, and Terry's accelerated MBA program. I kind of focused in finance and real estate. While I was in school there, actually I was at a career event, met Rebecca Cleveland, who at the time was at Julian LaCroix, now Tribridge. And we kind of hit it off, started talking about the multifamily industry. It wasn't necessarily what I was focused on. So I got really lucky in that regard that I found somebody who saw something in me. And even though I had no background in multifamily, Rebecca created a rotational program for me when I got out of school that largely started on site, operational, and then spent some time kind of at the home office to learn the investment side of the business. That role actually pretty quickly took me to Charleston, South Carolina. LaCroix bought a portfolio in Charleston. It was kind of their first footing into the area. We're trying to figure out how to execute. Me being naive at the time, just kind of raised my hand. I'll go try to figure that out. And fortunately I did. We moved to Charleston. Haven't looked, that was in 2005, and just love it here. It's a wonderful town. That experience initially for about 2.5 years, I was on site with an on-site team executing, kind of the operational plan. And while that probably wasn't what I foresaw out of school as my kind of foray into real estate, that operational background and kind of on the ground execution experience was huge for anything I've done since. It's been foundational. So after a couple of years, I met some of the Greystar team, kind of in the, at the time, fledgling investment group of Greystar. Ryan Knapp was actually a co-founder of Middle Street. At the time, was at Greystar. He was one of the first people I met that kind of convinced me to come over into the investment group, where I got an opportunity on the asset management team. That was in 2007. Man, I barely knew what I was doing, but I was fortunate enough to be around people that I could just learn through osmosis, that would invite me into meetings. It's really where I learned the investment side of the business through Ryan, Wes Fuller, Chris Riley, folks like that, Kevin Caberna, everybody that was kind of in an open area in an office that was willing to allow you to be part of the conversation and kind of learn from it. So, during my time at Greystar, it was mostly in Charleston. About by 2010, I had moved out to the Atlanta office, kind of helping kind of grow the regional presence there. That was right after Greystar had acquired JPI. So a big part of the role was kind of integrating two different cultures, two different groups of folks kind of into one. So that was a really rewarding experience. Met some just absolutely incredible people. Adrian and I already knew each other by then because we were working in an asset management and execution kind of relationship with some of our owned assets. But that's where I got to work with Adrian kind of more full-time amongst a bunch of other just really amazing people. From there, I left actually in 2011 from Greystar to take an opportunity with kind of a growing owner operator there. This is back in Charleston now. Spent a lot of my time helping kind of grow our operational platform, help sophisticate it a little bit as we were kind of buying in the new cycle. So this is right after the GFC, big buying opportunity, heavy growth from probably 2012 to 2016. So with that comes a lot of the pain of kind of getting our operation right and moving. Fortunately, we're able to hire in some really talented people to create a real great owner-operator model. From there, reunited with Ryan and Adam Monroe with Middle Street as they were kind of looking for somebody to kind of come in and kind of do something similar. And, had Middle Street had big expansion plans, both on the development side and on the investment side. So I was fortunate to join up in 2020, very beginning of it. Little did I know that COVID was about to happen. And I think that was actually good timing for everybody because it kind of sped up, getting to know Middle Street's LPs and having them comfortable with a very uncertain environment from an asset management standpoint to kind of understand how we are working our way through it and kind of interfacing with our management companies. So fast forward to now, we're kind of off and running and kind of looking at a start of a new cycle. So it's a little bit of a difficult time, I would say, in our industry, but also one that I view as kind of a new opportunity and a new cycle moving forward.
I want to stay a little bit on your current role and tell us a little bit about your responsibilities as Chief Operating Officer at Middle Street, and maybe let us in a little bit on the size of your portfolio. What's the footprint? Where are your assets located? And then my understanding is that you're 100% third-party managing your deals, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So yeah, our footprint, Adrian, is predominantly South, SEC country at the moment. We'll probably continue expanding that to be more Sun Belt, but I think the SEC will continue to expand to be in the Sun Belt too. So I think we're kind of working in unison there. We're kind of throughout the Southeast, both our investment portfolio and development. It's two different models. On the development side, we like to have somebody kind of planting a flag in kind of each of our major markets to help kind of through the entitlement process and find the right locations and be a leader in that market. On the investment side of the business, that's still, pretty much a nucleus of folks here in the Charleston office. It's good to all be together, kind of studying where our investments should be placed and why, and then get out and understand those markets. Fortunately, those two sides of the business communicate really well. So we have a good understanding of replacement costs. We have a good understanding of kind of what's evolving in each market because we have folks planted there in the regions. Right now, our portfolio size is actually relatively small. We sold probably 90% of our existing investment portfolio at the end of 2021. We just didn't see the value in being a buyer at the time. There's kind of a combination of a number of things kind of happening at that time. Obviously, in hindsight, that's probably obvious to a lot of folks, but kind of the combination of running off some very unsustainable operating trends, double-digit rent growth, things that were just frankly not healthy for the industry. You kind of juice forward-looking NOI trends with that kind of historical information that's just not sustainable. Put a bunch of really, really cheap leverage on it and high leverage. And the valuations were just very difficult to make sense of. So we were able to kind of let loose a lot of our portfolio at the time and then reallocate those funds into some other parts of our business. I don't know if I've addressed everything in your question, Adrian. I feel like I'm now just kind of rambling along with things, but back to fee management. Yes, we do rely on kind of the professionals in all of our markets. I think there's a number of advantages for Middle Street. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer necessarily in a kind of an owner-operator model versus an owner fee management model. I think we could spend all kinds of time debating the differences and the evolution of our industry and what's going to be the best impact, right? For us at the time, for us to be able to, in 2021, say, we see a sell opportunity here, we need to take advantage of it, and then from a pure fiduciary and investment level standpoint, be able to go implement that decision. I think that being in a fee management model really helped us do that. Had that been our own, owner operator model and the stress that would have placed on our own company and our own operation, I don't know if we would have been able to make the same decision, right? So for us and the point that we are as a company, I think we've really benefited from relying on the professionals that have the scale, that have the talent in some of these markets where execution is just more and more difficult. So it's worked for us. We'll see what happens in the future.
I want to stay a little bit on a third-party management decision. What are some other reasons that led to the decision of third-party managing versus doing this in-house, building your own management company?
So yeah, I hit on kind of separating what might be kind of organizational decisions from the fiduciary decisions, right? That's one of them. That's one of the reasons. I think another reason is for a smaller company like ours that's very mindful of our overhead. There's a separation of decision making and how you spend your time that I think that can be very valuable, right? So let's think about COVID again for a minute, right? That was an incredibly hard time for everybody in our industry to kind of figure out, what kind of regulations we should be following and how we should approach things the right way. For our company to be able to rely on phenomenal organizations like a Greystar to have those top thinkers, those forward-thinking people in a room and helping us guide us through it was exceptionally helpful, especially for kind of our own time management as we figured that out. Also think that there is and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Adrian, from a different perspective from perhaps maintenance, but I do think that there is a flight to stability as an employee in the multifamily industry, especially in operations, where our industry has become so much more transactional, especially from 2019 through 2021, some of the most historically high transactional volume we've ever seen, we never ever may see, right? It creates such uncertainty from somebody who's on an on-site level that I would imagine the flight to a company that has scale, right? That has the ability, hey, if your property sells, you still got a job with us. It's just going to be next door. In some regards, there's a flight to the larger companies that have the ability to have that scale and that support network because it's become such a transactional environment.
I'd like to answer your question. I think that I've seen companies lately growing very, very fast, third-party management companies. I'm seeing that certain things could be missed in this process, right? While the focus is on a growth, then the clients, might end up suffering in this process because it's extremely hard to, scale any type of business, especially a third-party management business. This is something that I like to follow up later down the road on our conversation, but I want to turn this over to Chris.
Yeah, we could burn a lot of time on this, Adrian.
100%. Yeah. This could be, like you said, it could be an entire episode.
So to go deeper into technology, are there some strategic areas that you're targeting from a technology standpoint or even from a development standpoint that maybe stand out to you? Are there any kind of interesting things maybe you've talked about over the last couple of years that you're actually implementing now? That would be great. I always love to hear that.
Sure. I mean, like one thing that's continues to be front and center is finding the right business intelligence tool for our operation. Looked at a bunch of them, and there doesn't seem to be a one size fits all for us. But the amount of data that's in our space that's accessible, is hard to be able to grab and visualize, but also in the way that is meaningful to us, Middle Street as a company, and how we look at things. It's difficult. There's a lot of neat out of the box things that are pretty graphs, right? But what does it mean to us? I'm still searching for that right, kind of BI tool that can take data from 6-7 different operators, feed it into a system, and kind of give us the KPIs that we need. So that's a big one for us. I'd say if somebody from our development team was on this podcast, they'd have 5 things right off the bat that they want to see kind of moved into our new developments as we take shape. One of those for me has been providing, best in class wireless, right? I mean, I see wireless as a utility in the mind of a renter. And maybe I'm incorrect in this philosophy, but I don't think I am. You've always got to pay water and sewer. You've always got to pay electricity, and you've got to have good, strong internet capability. And so for our new builds, evaluating that space of how can we provide best in class, if not better than what any resident or homeowner could get off the street in our building, and then provide it at a cost that is at preferably much lower than what anybody could get from a retail environment. I think is an incredible value add. I mean, we talk about other value adds in our space, whether it's valet, X, Y, and Z, and I think those are all neat to haves. But when you really talk about creating a best-in-class utility, I think that's a game changer. There's also, I do think our space is on the radar for all kinds of regulatory concerns, which again could be a whole nother podcast that I really don't want to be a part of. And I think managed wireless is no different. I mean, I think it has its regulatory risks that a lot of people are really kind of trying to sort out right now. But all that being said, if you're asking me about one key technology that I think is a game changer for residents and developers alike, that would probably be it.
Jeff, I want to go back to our time at Greystar, and you being a part of an amazing growth right there. The entire company has grown, been growing since, right? We were fortunate enough to be part of this growth. I wanted to ask you, what were some challenges and what were some lessons that you learned from, scaling portfolios? I mean, just something massive scale. We're not talking about going by like 5-10%, like, 20-30%. Acquiring, You mentioned Greystar absorbing, actually purchasing JPI at some point. That was a huge, those, I think 25,000 units. That was a lot to absorb, even though Greystar was like 100+ units, but was still like growing by 25% within one transaction. So what were some challenges that you experienced along the way with scaling, and what were some lessons, learned, process?
It's a great question. When scaling within itself is the priority, you can have some negative outcomes, right? I mean, you can have a lot of kind of undue stress that at the end of the day, if you're just trying to operate good assets and have good people, that can create definitely some challenges. But I mean, think about going back. This is fun going back to 2010. I mean, like thinking about the office and the leaders that we had in that office and kind of where they are in their careers now is pretty amazing, right? I mean, Tracy Bowers, who was running the office, then went on to grow Range Water to all their success, and now has done a reboot to start Gallery. Kelly Steele, one of my favorite people on the planet, is now off COO of Woodward. Melissa White, manager, she's now running Perennial. Karen Key, asset living now, I think running the whole BTR department. She was a manager at the time. The list like goes on. Tasha Teal, still at Greystar, running pretty much operations for the owned assets in the Southeast, I believe. And then Adrian, I mean, look at you, right? Jason Garman was an analyst at a business school for us. He's running asset management for White Oak. I mean, so you can take a lot of incredible people put it in a big mixing bowl, and depending on what the goals are, it can be either super successful or not. But I think the proof of the folks that were there and the careers that they've had up until this point are just a reminder of kind of the talent pool that Greystar attracts, and certainly had at the time, and the small world that multifamily is.
It's actually great. We were at the AAA event yesterday and got to see Melissa and many of these folks, who've worked their way up through different organizations and through different roles. So really, really awesome to see amount of people that turned out for the show, and then just the camaraderie among people, and even through challenging times. So, you talk about talent, you talk about, the teams and culture. And I'm kind of curious, like, what advice you would give to a young professional who's really looking at leadership roles? Like, what have you learned over the years?
One thing, and probably first and foremost, would be just be coachable, right? I'm a huge believer in team sports, and I probably use way too many sports analogies for anybody's taste. Coachability to me is one of the biggest things. I mean, here we all are fairly far into our careers. We don't have it all figured out. We still need to be coached. We still need to be called out on things and provided constructive criticism. And we need to be open to that, right? I think there's a tendency, I mean, I certainly had this tendency when I was early in my career, wanting to protrude confidence. You don't know what you don't know yet. So yeah, you can be confident, but like be to instruction. I think the worst thing that can ever happen is you get deemed uncoachable, right? Like somebody who's trying to bring you along just gives up, right? Where's that going to leave you? So, that would be my first piece of advice. And coachability, by the way, also goes hand in hand with being a good team player. The world of real estate, and why I've always loved asset management, right? That's where I spent the majority of my career, is you're a generalist, man. You're playing across all kinds of different facets of the business plan, of the world of real estate. And so there are no bounds. And I love that. And I love being able to go be on site and be a problem solver there, and be on, calls about the disposition and, doing it all. Don't silo yourself, and certainly don't come off as somebody who's not willing to go help a teammate, right? First and foremost, that just be coachable. I would also say, whether or not this is a generational thing or maybe just kind of that cycle in kind of the employer-employee, it was very hard to attract talent, with a very, very low, everybody for a moment could go and choose their job, but man, earn it before you ask, right? Like just, when you're early in your career, prove yourself first and then have the conversation, right? Rather than, hey, I expect to be doing this and I'm not going to work until I get it. I think there's that reverse mentality that I'd love to see go back to the, show your value first. And that would be the other piece of advice, is always find a way to show value. You're in a point in the cycle where your particular role isn't very active. Well, that means you should definitely be trying to find something else that you can add somewhere else. And that will lead to responsibilities that aren't in your immediate career path, but that will also lead to responsibilities that make you a much better generalist. And anybody, as they get far enough in their career, needs to be somewhat of a generalist. Being open to kind of those indirect opportunities, I think, will make you more well-rounded, in the future. If you're trying to be in acquisitions and you're being asked to go turn units and evaluate a better process with the maintenance team, man, you're going to go learn a lot that day. Go do it, right? It doesn't have to be your full career, but it's going to help you later on. What else? I'm full of good advice that I didn't follow earlier in my career. Learn through osmosis. I was kind of talking about when I was first hired on into asset management with the investment group at Greystar. I had no clue what some folks were talking about, but I sure went and looked it up afterwards, right? So I know we probably overtalk the back to work or work from anywhere kind of subject matter to death, but man, get back in that office. Like if you're early in your career, go learn, just go sit in meetings where people are open to inviting you into them, or just ask, right? Just, hey, can I sit on this with you? Can I just, I'll be quiet. I just want to take some notes. Maybe I'll ask you afterwards. Put yourself in the situation where you can learn from people already far enough in their career. Folks coming out of school or entering the workforce where they had the ability to kind of work remotely and from anywhere. It did people early in their career an incredible disservice, in my opinion. I think get into the office, get around the decision makers. You're going to just learn so much. You're going to speed up your career immensely that way. And it's also going to help you build your network, which, by the way, treat your network like it's just career gold. Okay. I love fielding calls from folks that are looking to get into multifamily and how do I do it? And can you help me here? I love that stuff. I love helping younger people kind of field their way through. And it always, it doesn't surprise me when, after that help has been made, I never hear from them again, right? Like keep your network, keep it healthy. It's a small world multifamily. You never know when it's going to come back around. Adrian, you and I are a prime example of that, right? It's been 10 years and here we are on a podcast. So
it's not just that, but all the names that you mentioned earlier, Tasha, Kelly, Karen Key.
Oh yeah,
Jason. I mean, like you say, Jason was an entry-level analyst. I remember, I remember the cubicle he was sitting in.
That's right.
And, what an amazing journey, and what an amazing pool of talent. And then going back, I'm just thinking how fortunate I was to grow at that point in my career, being surrounded by people like them and like you. So that's just an amazing thing, and it's
likewise, right? I mean, that's what I've always loved. I fell into the multifamily industry, right? Like this, I was fortunate enough to get lucky and make my way. But one of the things that I've always loved is that while there was a path for somebody like myself out of business school that was willing to kind of take the indirect jobs, right, to kind of round out my career, and that worked. It also has this full opportunity for people from all walks of life, right? From extremely humble beginnings that are able to, just through self-dedication and hard work and being a good human being and working with other good human beings, have had incredible success, right? There's zero barrier to entry to having a good career in multifamily. I think that's unique, and I think that's a wonderful thing.
And now a word from Dean Fungawing, founder and CEO, Kairos.
We've invented this smart material. It's a conductive material that can be shaped or sized for any area. So if you think about high spatial coverage, you look at a giant mechanical room. How do we cover a whole mechanical room with a sensor, right? We've developed the strip sensor to create containment areas where if water were to leave this threshold, you would instantly know about it. We created special sensors for high moisture environments like bathrooms. You're like, well, I don't want to get a bunch of false alarms from the steamy shower. Well, we fixed that because we can actually print the sensor in a way that it's less sensitive or more sensitive based on the environment. And so we've been able to solve really weird issues. Like I challenge any multifamily owner that's got a water problem to come to us and say, can you help us solve this? Because we've done this for a 158-year-old site in San Francisco, 100-year-old building here in Atlanta. You have a hodgepodge of plumbing, very difficult situations to solve, and we've solved them, right? From our very first customer to the customers that we have today. Again, every one of them has seen an ROI based off of the historical losses. Again, historical losses is the key thing that you need in order to solve the problem and justify the ROI.
I love that. And I love how you talked about, the sports aspect, following through on what you say you're going to do, discipline, that you may not get what you want right now, but if you work and you show up and you're there, I love that. Like I'm today, even though the background looks like a home, I'm actually at the Atlanta Tech Village offices today recording.
Okay. I thought that was your piano. I thought you were going
to not yet. Saving up for that. But no, I love getting in. I love the collisions. I think I've been remote since 2010, but I absolutely love getting together with people. And I think this is a business, Walt, who's here in Atlanta, he talks about needing to be there physically, face to face. And so many people I've gotten to meet here in Atlanta, it's been a game changer. Absolutely love it. So I'm kind of curious, I'd love to, as you talked about sports and I have a big theory about like sports and athletes and process. Number one, are you more football? What sports are you into? And then number two, are there things that maybe stood out from some coaches or people that you've admired in sports that you maybe have been some stories that you've seen kind of translate into your life in real estate?
All right. Interesting question. So first off, college, basketball, football, all the way. I'm more of a basketball guy than anything else. And college basketball to me is still one of those. I mean, it's had its ups and downs, but still ultimately kind of a purist team sport, at heart. And some of my friends give me a hard time about this, but I'm pretty diversified, right? I went to JMU until only recently where they kind of have anything kind of on the D1 level to talk about. So that's really exciting. Obviously, I'm a little bit of a Georgia poser. I mean, I went to school there. I was there for a year, and that's nothing like a lot of people who are just dyed in the wool Georgia fans all their lives. But I know enough to get by, right? I think from a leadership standpoint related to team sports, I mean, one recent example was me and my buddies were all up. Actually, one of our friends that we play basketball with was promoted. This was a couple years ago to the assistant coach of Georgia's basketball team. So we all went up to go see him in Athens, and he got us onto the floor. We got to play in the morning. It was a really cool experience. And so anyway, at halftime of the Georgia basketball game, in the tunnel, lounge area, and in comes Kirby Smart, right? Kirby's there with his son and his son's friend. And they were sitting in front of us at the game. We kind of saw him there, and people would come up and shake his hand and so forth. But at halftime, Kirby is in this lounge area, and he is just trounced by people. And this is right after they won their first natty. I mean, everybody is all over him. And I just thought what was so cool was, I mean, look, it's part of the gig, but he handled it so well. He had his son and his son's friend, and that's all he wanted to do was spend time with them. But he was gracious with his time. He shook hands, and then he just really politely just moved back over to the table and spent time, with his family. And I think that kind of showed this nice separation of like, I know my role, right? I know part of my role is to be an interface with all these fans. And then I'm going to go balance that out with going to spend time with my son at this basketball game. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that watching him in that environment just told me a lot about kind of who he is.
I think a lot of people think sports is just, these people are so lucky and when they win, but you look at some of these athletes and they're right back. And I've admired so many of these players because they're right back to practice. The day they win or the day they lose, it doesn't matter. It's back to process, back to action. Kobe Bryant, a good example, right? Hey, we won, doesn't prove anything. We're back at it Monday morning.
He's back there grinding, and think of the distractions that these guys and these gals have in their lives, right? Just all the distractions. And the fact that they can stay disciplined and do that. And it's not dissimilar to any of the rest of us mere mortals, right? Like if you've got balanced family life and you've got lack of volatility, you got good support there, you're going to be able to be that much better of a performer. I think the two go hand in hand.
Jeff, what are you seeing, what you could share with us as far as trends in the market?
We're talking a little bit about what I'd consider the end of the cycle, right? Which was really, really high valuations, a lot of deals bought with what ultimately became broken business plans, right? The third value add plan on this deal, there's a reset that I think is already on its way. And how is that going to play out, right? So as an example, I mean, like we are believers. I'm a believer in being an early mover into the start of a new cycle. Right now, valuations are very distorted, largely because nobody knows where interest rates are going to land for the foreseeable future. I think taking a big picture look, if you're buying in a market you believe in an asset type that has long-term, very clear demand with a disruption in new supply, then you should be to an extent risk on. And that's what we've done. I mean, we've probably on the acquisition side of the business, which I oversee, we've acquired about $200 million of real estate in the last 12 months. That's not a lot for super large companies. Smaller company like ourselves, that's meaningful. I'd like to see us do about the same this year as a recognizing it's still early and a little bit distorted. Sometimes that's when the best opportunities arise. That being said, I think what we're also watching is, a lot of the heaviest transaction activity at the highest values, kind of end of cycle happened in 2021. The emergence of debt funds where, it was 3-year bridge money on floating rates. A lot of that's coming to term as we speak. It'll be interesting to see how much of that resets kind of through the system quickly versus how much of that is the, classic extend and pretend, right? How many of those deals are going to be extended and modified on their terms in order to just survive, And Adrian, I don't need to tell you the difference of walking into an asset for the first time on the maintenance side with a brand new business plan that's well capitalized versus a deal that's been suffering from cash flow issues for 2-3 years and has now just been extended for a year to 2 years of more suffering cash flow, right? I mean, what does that operation look like? What's the resident experience like? How does that affect the maintenance team? And knowing that they can knock out work orders or not in a reasonable way. So I think it's going to be interesting. It's going to be an interesting landscape for our industry as to how those deals that frankly need to be reset, in what fashion are they reset and how quickly. I think that'll have a meaningful effect on kind of how our industry is kind of operated in the next 5 years.
I think you just hit on something that's really important. Obviously, the history and reading and having mentors who've been through cycles before. I just sat down with a CEO here locally in Chastain Park who said, Chris, many people have never been through these cycles. This is their first cycle they're witnessing. And
Sure.
I think you just kind of shared, having that tool belt, being ready. I've always heard the saying, this too will pass, right? Whether it's good or whether it's bad.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, to hear from you, what are some of the tools, you talked, we connected before this. And I think what do you think that are some of the skills that are crucial, maybe some of the tools that people should be equipping themselves at as they're penciling out these deals and thinking about this? What are some of those basic tools and maybe some of the more advanced tools you tend to use?
Yeah, I mean, just going back first to your comment about not seeing cycles, there's entire companies that have emerged in our space that were really, really good at raising capital. Back to your commentary about technology, right? These companies that emerged really good at raising capital and also retail capital, crowdfunding. On the buy side, very successful being aggressive in being able to buy at a certain time. And in fact, that's why Middle Street couldn't be, competitive on the buy side with some of these groups are coming in over the top and could just buy. However, you haven't been through a cycle and been through deal flow that isn't won on the buy, right? It's not won on compressed cap rates where you can exit out and make a lot of money, but you got to fight your way through it, right? You've got to asset manage. You've got to execute your way through the deal. You got to fight out. I think that's going to be the stage that we're going to be in right now. And so I think organizations hopefully are going to put a really high premium on having players on their asset management team that know how to fight their way out, know how to kind of help create value hand in hand with operations to get to a good spot. And there again, I think that's just where we're having generalists and having people that have kind of been through a cycle and seen it are going to help make or break some companies in that position.
Jeff, career advice. What are some great pieces of career advice that you've received over the years, and how have they guided you through your professional career?
One of the best pieces of advice that always stands out for me, this was actually the opening remarks from a faculty member at Terry when I first joined the MBA program. He was at the time head of the finance group. His advice was to all of us was get out of your comfort zone. You're about to select classes. You're in a safe environment right now. Don't be afraid to think. Go take the coursework. Go have the experiences, right? And I think this applies to our work life very much in the same way. Go do the stuff that you're afraid to do, right? Go be on a live podcast with Adrian. Go do stuff that is out of your comfort zone. You'll be rewarded for it. That context was, hey, you're in a safe area. You're out of school. You're paying us tuition. We're not going to let you fail, right? Once you go out in the real world and you've got an MBA by your name, everybody expects you to know everything, right? That was kind of the messaging at the time, but I think that applies to our careers as well. It's find an environment where you've got people, you've got leadership that wants to see you push yourself. And at times you're going to fail. As long as you're learning from those mistakes, you're going to be a lot better. You're going to bounce back a lot higher because of it. One of my favorite people I've worked with, I remember when she came to me, distraught because she had engaged on something. It probably cost the company $5,000. It didn't work, right? And she was just distraught about losing $5,000 of the company's money. I was like, look, you're going to go places in your career where you're going to lose a lot more money than $5,000. Just don't repeat history. Don't make the same mistake twice. You've got to challenge yourself. You've got to be willing to take risks. You don't, you're just going to be stagnant.
The thing I think about is in frameworks is I learned about the two-way door rule. Are you walking through doors that are one way and they're devastating decisions, or is it actually a two-way where you can test, you can validate, you can make a mistake that isn't, 5,000 isn't bad compared to millions, right? Or losing an
100%.
entire property.
Yeah.
I think one of the interesting things is you mentioned, the deals you're working on in Atlanta. I'm really excited to actually see the Midtown deal. Is that planning on opening? Do you have a timeline on when that will be opening, that Midtown deal?
Well, we have a couple Midtown deals under construction right now, both of which we're super excited about. So Johnson Basil, who's our president of development, he sits in Atlanta with most of our actual construction design team. It's pretty much the backbone of our development team is actually in Atlanta in the Ponce City market space. So we have 12th and Juniper, which is a dual high-rise 489 unit deal that they've been working super hard on with our partner. And I was actually in Atlanta yesterday as we were talking about viewing kind of management RFPs for that deal. It's going to deliver first units, I believe, in February of next year. And I mean, it's going to be incredible, really defining deal right there in Midtown. It's walkable to Piedmont Park, beautiful views. And then we have another one in West Midtown that is going to be opening a little bit earlier than that. I think by the end of this year. We've already engaged a management team on that. Gallery Residential, Tracy Bowers is going to be executing on the ground for us there. So we're really excited to partner with them. That deal is going to go off the ground. It's in this really cool area. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Loring Heights. Very much a neighborhood feel. That's just right across the rail yard from Atlantic Station. So you kind of have this backdoor access into Midtown, but when you get home, you're kind of in this cool urban, kind of neighborhood feel. So I think the proximity is really special to Midtown. And then you go up to the top floors, and you've got this incredible skyline view. So it's a neat deal.
It's incredible. Yeah. To your point. Yeah. That Juniper, I mean, like looking at your portfolio, there's such unique and diverse, you don't have a one brush across the board. It looks like almost all of your properties that you develop have a unique neighborhood feel to them that really resonates. And that Juniper one really looks interesting. So I think that's going to stand out in the skyline.
Look, hats off to our development team. They're a really talented group. Derek Owen and our construction and design team put a ton of thought into the space and the programming. And we work with some great LPs, some great partners on each individual basis to kind of bring them to life, and really imaginative management partners to execute the vision. So thank you for that. Yeah, we're excited about a lot that we have coming out of the ground. I was mentioning, I think earlier before we went live, our deal in Chattanooga. That's getting set to deliver here soon too. I've been in and out of Chattanooga my whole career of having owned assets there. I've always loved that town. And there's one piece of dirt specifically that always baffled my mind. It's like, how is this still here? It's in this area called North Shore, right by a Whole Foods, right across the street from probably the best retail food and bed area you could ask for. And here's this beautiful spot right by the river. And sure enough, fast forward years later, that's ours to go execute. And we're building a really beautiful deal right there that it's going to overlook, look back on downtown, be part of the North Shore area, which is super vibrant and fun. And I just love towns like that have just really benefited from folks being motivated to kind of move and go love where you live. I think Chattanooga's got a lot of runway in that regard.
Jeff, the journey to the top could be lonely, could feel lonely at times. What helped you keep going throughout your career? What were some resources that you found to overcome that loneliness?
Always been really fortunate to have just good people in my life. I'd say career-wise, I've never had one particular mentor as an example. I wish I did, but I just never really found or nurtured that relationship well enough to always have that one person. But I've always just had great people, regardless of, titles, org charts, or anything else, just having people that understand you and support you and are champions of you has just meant a lot to me. That gets you through the hard times, and that helps also kind of keep you straight, in terms of not getting over your skis, having people kind of call you out on certain things that you respect their opinion. It's great. I would encourage that for anybody. Is just kind of find your group, want to see you successful. Ryan and Adam are good examples of that. There's when you find people that believe you kind of go do anything, you end up kind of going and doing anything, right? So try to be that for others, kind of pay that back a little bit. I kind of mentioned before, but I've been real fortunate to have a very good, supportive family life. My wife's wonderful. She's always been really supportive of my career. My kids are total nutbags, but they're super fun. Having that piece of my life, steady and fulfilling, has allowed me to kind of have the same in my career. Life's too short. Cutting out the volatility, cutting out the toxicity is super important. Sometimes you don't realize it's there until you've already kind of been forced to make a change. But
you spoke about, interesting on this, around family and friends and network. I'm curious, like, as you talk about these mentors and people, some of them you met through career movements and meeting one-to-one or in group settings. As we think about like NAA Apartmentalize coming up, we just had AAA, the trade shows are happening right now and bringing people together. What advice would you give for others, and how involved have you been? Have you found like going to NAA, their annual event, or going to NMHC, or going to like the Charleston local event, AAA? How involved have those been, and have those been helpful for you to connect with friends and or mentors?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned, those events. You're picking up on a weak spot of mine. I have not been overly involved in a lot of those MNHC, apartment association stuff. I'll make it here and there, but it's never been a big focus of mine, right, wrong, or indifferent. Probably wrong. I've always gotten more out of smaller setting discussions and relationships. Big networking events I've just personally not gotten as much out of. I probably should have. So there's a couple events that kind of do panel discussions or kind of small group settings. Love that. I think that's very useful. That kind of creates the more genuine conversation around the room rather than the general networking where you're kind of talking about the same thing 10 times, right? I don't know if that answers your question. I think the smaller group settings create a lot more value, at least in my eyes.
That's really helpful. And I'd ask, you've named some names of people you've gotten to work with. Is there someone, and it could have been some of the people you've mentioned, whether it's Tracy or other people, is there someone who has made a big impact, though they don't have to necessarily be in the real estate space, but maybe someone who made a major impact on your career, or that you've really trusted, who, has just always been in your corner?
Definitely my father. Seeing how he kind of handled, a career and a great family life was super influential. As a kid, he never, in my eyes, had a bad day coming home. He definitely had them, it just didn't affect us. I would say if I had to pick one person, it would probably be that. Just trying to model the same thing for my family and my career.
Jeff, as we approach the end of this amazing conversation, what are some final thoughts that you have for us, for the audience?
Gosh, Adrian, I don't know. I feel like you've peppered me with questions, and I've talked a lot here. I don't know if I have necessarily any other questions. I would love to hear more kind of what are your goals with this podcast, and as you kind of continue to expand the listener base, what do you see kind of the next year of kind of your goals for the effort?
Our goals are to bring more executives like you, individuals and professionals that are not easy to get access to for various reasons. Main reason is that, when you're an executive, you have a lot on your shoulders. Like, your time is extremely valuable. Your schedule is extremely busy. We're very fortunate to have executives being very responsive to us. We're scheduled like 3 months ahead for this particular podcast. And what I'm looking for is really to keep bringing those extremely accomplished professionals to this platform to share their wisdom, to share their valuable experiences, and actually encourage others to follow their dreams, not necessarily the same path as you follow, but whatever they're believing in, to see that it's possible. Like you share with us that at the very beginning, you were kind of like lost. You didn't know much about the industry, about what would it take to get the job done, but you showed up, you learn, and you put your time in and your effort, and here you are after 10, 15, 20 years.
Yep.
Everybody could, like you said, there's zero, like, I guess, obstacles for someone to get in an industry, get in at a very entry level and make the best of what it is. Our goal is to keep having those valuable conversations, bring in these valuable guests and, provide value to our audience. I think it's needed. There's a void in a space of conversations between one-on-one conversations and many events that we have at the industry level. Outside of that, there's like 90+% of the people, the stakeholders in the industry, they're not included. They're not part of the one-on-one conversations, and they're not part of those industry events. We're trying to fill part of that void by having those conversations. I hope that answered your question. That was kind of a long answer.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's great. Y'all are, I think, onto something, and I think you're bringing a unique viewpoint, Adrian, into our space, and then combining that with Chris, your tech background, I think creates two very interesting, kind of spaces. So, best of luck to you all. I'm sure you'll be super successful in continuing to grab whoever you like to join the conversation. So, thank you for having me. Big honor. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff.
Appreciate your time with us. Chris, any final thoughts?
No, this has been fantastic. I mean, I appreciate you going deep. That's really our goal, is to hear the stories and challenge ourselves, challenge our guests, and share this with the world, because that's what we learn. I learn from others, and you're right. You have to, when you hear the vulnerability of others, you hear their stories, you're able to take risks yourself and realize you're not alone. So thank you for coming on, Jeff. Really excited to see you soon. Really excited to see your developments and your work.
Yeah, thank you.
Really, we get to, which I love about it, is we're building housing for people and always improving on that. So thanks, and looking forward to seeing you in real life soon.
Maybe next time we'll see each other. It's at the grand opening of Juniper. So that'd be.
Let's do it. I'm excited.
Sounds great.
Everybody, thank you so much for being with us, hanging out with us today. I know that LinkedIn has some difficulties, so I think some of our viewers had difficulties logging in. So it was a LinkedIn technical issue. The great news is that we have everything recorded. So for those that couldn't join us live, they're going to have the opportunities to have this recorded. But for those of you that were able to log in, want to thank you. We appreciate you. We hope to see you back here soon, hopefully on the next episode. I want to thank our sponsors for making this broadcast possible. They are Kairos and GPS Roof Leak Repair. Have an amazing afternoon all, and we see you next time. Take care.